Store-bought broth is inevitable. We all use it. It's also thin and a little bit flavorless. I'm going to show you 2 broth booster soup recipes that transform the store-bought broth into something that tastes homemade. We're going to rebroth our store-bought broth in our bright and silky weeknight Greek egg and lemon soup. We're going to boost the store-bought broth, and what that does is we're going to get a complex flavor, a beautiful silky texture in 45 minutes. It's going to taste like we cooked for hours, but we just made it after work. So we have a quart of store-bought broth. We add a little water because we need more volume, but we don't want more store-bought broth. Here we have a bone and skin on chicken breast. By grating our carrots, instead of using big chunks like you would when you're making broth from scratch, they're going to release their flavor more quickly. The sweetness and that carrot earthiness that we're looking for as a flavor boost, it's going to happen much faster. We're also adding diced onions, a very common aromatic in homemade chicken broth. And those will become vegetables in our final soup as well. So it's all steps you want to do anyways. We're just going to give them a little more time, adding them now with the chicken so that we can bolster that store-bought broth. So this is a Greek lemon and egg chicken soup. So we're really doubling down on that lemon flavor. The lemon peel has essential oils. It's the lemon flavor. We'll add acidity with some lemon juice from that same lemon at the end to brighten everything up. But right now we're just adding that lemon flavor to the base of our broth. Once the re-broth broth is up to a nice gentle simmer, we're just going to cover it, reduce the heat, and let it cook for about 18 or 20 minutes until the chicken breast is fully cooked to 160 degrees. This is going to give time for the carrots and the onions to put some sweetness back into the broth, and for the fat from the chicken skin and the collagen in the bones of the chicken to help thicken and add flavor and texture to the broth. So the chicken can come out, it's cooked, we'll let it cool, and then we'll remove the skin and the bones and shred it. We want to leave the onions and carrots in. They're the main vegetables of this soup, but we want to find the lemon zest, which is not super fun to bite into, and fish it out. Broth is at a simmer still, in goes the rice, and at this point we're going to add a little salt and pepper. Even though we rinse the rice, right? Rice is a starch, it still has plenty of starch to give to the broth, so we'll put a little of that in there to add a little more body to help bolster that thin box of chicken stock that we started with. So we've got it up to a nice vigorous simmer. We're going to reduce it down to low, cover, and cook until the rice is cooked through. While it cooks, we can get the next steps ready. So off with the skin, out with the bones, and then we just want to shred this to go back into the soup at the very end. So up to this point, the steps I've taken, you can really use for almost any chicken soup. You might change which aromatics you rebroth your broth with. Instead of carrot, you might use parsnip. Or instead of onion, you might use leek. You might put in lemongrass and some ginger coins. But you can add flavors to your broth to cook along with your chicken that will reinforce the flavors that you want in the soup that maybe are mild in the store-bought broth or non-existent. The next step where we add egg, that's more particular to this recipe. So we need 3 whole eggs. I am going to add lemon juice to the eggs as well, but right before I add some broth. Okay, so now our rice should be done. And if we weren't making egg and lemon soup, at this point you could add dill and chicken and be done. And you have a nice, light, refreshing, lemony, dilly chicken soup. This next step is for this recipe. So we've got our broth, we've got our 3 eggs. We're going to add the lemon juice from the lemon we zested earlier. Now let's talk about tempering eggs. This is a way to make sure your eggs add silkiness to your chicken broth and don't become a curdled mess. We don't just dump the eggs into the soup. While whisking, we slowly add broth. It slowly heats up the temperature of the eggs without shocking them, and they stay nice and loose. The other sort of picky thing is you don't want your broth to boil once the eggs go in. You don't even really want it to simmer. You want it really gently to heat back up. Okay, so now we can add our eggs back into our soup because we brought the temperature of those yolks up. So this transports me right back to Greece. Beautiful. In goes our chicken. The broth is still really hot. All that's left to do is eat at this point. Plenty of body from rebrothing the broth. That's also much more flavor, fresher flavor than sort of how stale store-bought broth can be. and then body from the rice and from the eggs. And then it's amazing, always, what a little pop of color at the end does. So we've re-brothed our egg lemon soup, and its flavors are surprisingly very lemony. The dill, which I chose instead of chives because I think it really pairs well with lemon. And then that sweet earthiness from those carrots we shredded and the onions that we added when we re-brothed our broth. And the eggs don't taste eggy. They just add this richness and a silkiness. So you've got a silky texture and a lemony, dilly, earthy soup. This Thai and rice pork meatball soup is another broth booster recipe. The recipe is inspired by a bowl of Khao Tom that we had in Thailand. The backdrop is simple broth and rice, and then layered with a world of flavors and aromas. First, we're going to choose a flavorful fat, and we're using lard, but you could also use coconut oil. Once the lard or oil is melted, we're going to add shallots. So we're not trying to deeply caramelize these. So once there's a coating of fat on the bottom, even though there's still some full pieces of lard, I go ahead and add the shallots. I don't want to add them to a screaming hot pan and get scorched edges. We're looking to develop nice, rich background flavor, not that fried shallot, scorchy char thing that you do want in some broths. Not this one. We're gonna add a little salt, and this helps sweat the shallots. So sweating shallots is when the same as sweating onions. It's when you add salt to draw the water out from this really water-heavy vegetable. That water keeps the pan cool, and that helps us slowly cook the shallots and slowly develop flavor. So this is about 4 or 5 more minutes to cook. We're gonna be adding garlic, ginger, and lemongrass. So we've got a little bit of browning developed. First in goes the garlic, and garlic burns really quickly. So instead of adding it directly to the bottom of the pan, I like to add it on top of the shallots so that I can then stir them into the shallot mixture. We're gonna put in our lemongrass and our ginger. Richness, floral, acidity, pungency, pepperiness from the ginger. This is no longer your boring store-bought broth, which, speaking of, we now need to add. So we're gonna bring this up to a simmer and let these cook gently, infusing their flavor into the broth for about 15 minutes, which is the perfect amount of time for us to make our meatballs, which add the heft to this dish. These meatballs are super simple. We're gonna start with 8 ounces of ground pork. We're gonna add in a tablespoon of fish sauce, some chili garlic sauce, and some white pepper. And mix this all up. So we're gonna make small meatballs using about 2 teaspoons of a little mixture here. So we've removed the lemongrass. We have our shallots, ginger, and garlic still in here. And now we're just going to cook these 3 to 4 minutes. They will also add some nice body to the broth because there's fat in pork, there's flavor. Okay, so we're gonna bring this up to a simmer and let them cook gently. And while they cook, let's talk about rice. So for this soup, you don't want fresh rice. You want old rice. Fresh rice gets mushy. The old rice keeps a really nice texture. But here's a little tip. In case you wanna make this soup impromptu and you don't have old rice, you can cook fresh rice, put it out on a parchment lined tray, and then chill it down in the fridge or even the freezer for a few minutes. This will dry it out and help it have the same texture we look for in old rice. We want 4 cups of it. Just give that a minute to reheat. Then comes that world of flavors and aromas that I was talking about. We'll boost the full soup first, so fish sauce, chili garlic sauce, lime juice. Give that a stir gently. Remember your meatballs are in there. And now we build a bowl. Make a little bit of cilantro, a nice pile of fried shallots, and 2 gorgeous egg halves. Look at that, it's gorgeous. We use a few simple steps, sautéing the aromatics in a flavorful fat and letting them simmer for 15 minutes to transform that box of broth into something that tastes homemade. So store-bought broth doesn't have to be boring. I just showed you 2 ways to boost that box and turn it into something that tastes homemade.